My name is Soviet Army, and as I've said before, I'm not a communist. Now, a lot of things have happened since I last posted anything. Barack Obama got elected to my great happiness. Proposition 8 passed in California to my great displeasure. And many other things. Anyway, I've gotten enough comments to convince me to post something again, so here I am. And I have a very controversial issue to talk about, so I'm going to have to ask you to bear with me and remain reasonable. Now, I'm sure you've all been watching the war in Gaza, and I have to be honest, I don't see why everybody got so worked up about this one. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they have like their own semi-annual shootout over there. It's like a yearly tradition. Nevertheless, whatever happens, happens. As a sort of disclaimer, I have to tell you that I will categorically refuse to respond or read any comments posted on this particular video. I have had plenty of experience arguing this particular point, and it is extremely controversial, and it turns to insults very, very, very quickly. So keep an open mind. I promise to review every point of view as reasonably as possible, and I will assure you that no one in this conflict is truly innocent. So, Israel's invasion of the Gaza Strip. I have to say, I have to side with Israel on this particular point. To be honest, I know plenty of Muslim people, plenty of them are my friends, and we get along perfectly fine. But when the conversation turns to this, it always gets ugly. For that matter, Jews and Muslims get along perfectly fine in the U.S. When they get to the Middle East, it all turns ugly very quickly. Anyway, I think the whole area of that world should just be completely like wiped out because too many people being way too unreasonable and way too much religious fervor. And it's not just the Muslims, don't get me wrong. For that matter, fundamentalist Jews have plenty of blame on this one. I mean, like, some of them behave so erratically, even contrary to the Israeli government's wishes, to the point where they just say, you know, God gave us this land, and they move to these places in Gaza where it's just, I mean, the Israeli government even says, we can't protect you, and they just keep on moving there, and that's how this whole conflict keeps going. Anyway, I have to disagree with the photos that the media puts up about this war. I mean, they keep putting up pictures of civilians crying and buildings getting blown up and all that stuff, but have they forgotten what these people have done to Israel? I mean, just walk down the street in Jerusalem. Every cafe has a little list of people that died there because of some bombing or other. Every single one. And it's just so indiscriminate. I mean, Israel, when they go in, when they went in this particular war, they used very high precision weapons, you know, laser guided, etc., and they struck high priority targets, you know, military camps, etc., Hamas strongholds. Hamas, on the other hand, behaves very differently. For that matter, a lot of terrorists behave very differently. What they do is they take a nice little homemade tube filled with explosives, put it on a big old Russian Katyusha rocket, and just launch it in the direction of Israel. I mean, I'm sorry, just because Israel possesses the technology to block this sort of attack doesn't mean that this isn't an act of war. For that matter, this is an act of terrorism, which is, terrorism is defined as a war crime during peacetime. Anyway, I have to say that Israel's response is reasonable, considering that it is absolutely unacceptable for one country to launch missiles at another constantly. I mean, imagine if Mexico started launching missiles at Texas. I mean, if the United States Army doesn't go in there, half of the Texas population will get out their shotguns and go, and no one will criticize them for it. Launching missiles at one country is an act of war, and it deserves a just response. Now, all Hamas is really getting what they deserve on this one. I have to express my deepest regret for what the civilians have suffered through that live in that area, but they need to act too. In order to stop this, they have to act on their own. No other nation can influence them in this area. I mean, it's their right to elect their own government, but they have to act for peace. Hamas, I mean, Hamas is not even civilized. It has no claim to being civilized, much less being a party even. I mean, just look at the CNN article. It's called Rival Factions Trade Accusations, spying, violence in Gaza. I mean, Hamas, there are two political parties in Gaza and Palestine, Al-Hamas and Al-Fatah. Al-Fatah being the more peaceful. Al-Hamas, members of Al-Hamas, are taking people out into the street, mostly people affiliated with Al-Fatah, and just shooting them on the spot right there, sometimes torturing them. Read the article. It's all right there. This is not, by any terms, considered civilized behavior in modern times. No way. I mean, this is something that communists and Nazis do, not civilized nations. I mean, no offense meant to anybody by that comment, but Hamas is not and has never been the freely elected government in that part of the world. The people there need to stand up for peace and diplomacy on their own. None of us can interfere, it's their right, but when this war spills out of their borders and begins to harm civilians, and countries like Israel have no choice but to put the lives of their citizens first and act. Now, I do have some related criticism for the Israeli government too. The U.S. is currently the largest supplier of their military budget, and we have no plans to change that because they're our ally. But I have to say that when the U.S. says that enough is enough, Israel has to listen, because if we give them money to maintain their military, then we have to have a say in their military policy. And when we say enough is enough, Israel needs to stop, not delay everything for like 3 more days until they bomb whatever else they feel like. They have to stop when we say they have to stop, because if not, funding gets cut off. And I have to say the U.S., a lot of lobbyists and a lot of parties on this one just kind of act unreasonably. And we won't be able to cut off Israel's military budget mainly because of this. But just because we can't cut off their budget doesn't mean we don't have a say in what Israel does in terms of their military. So, in short, Israel needs to realize that they are on a short leash. When we say enough bombing, it's enough. So, in conclusion, I have to tell you again, I will not be responding or reading comments on this particular video. I hope that all of you who see this will be able to make up their own educated opinions about this issue and act reasonably in accordance with those educated opinions, not turn to insults and fighting like people in that part of the world do. So, thank you for your attention, and my name is SovietArmy. I am not a communist.